The quadratic formula reads, the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a, is equal to x. Remember, the quadratic formula helps us find the x-intercepts or the roots, sometimes even called zeros, of a quadratic graph or relationship when factoring doesn't work. Just remember that the quadratic formula can be used only when the quadratic relationship's rule is in its general form. Then we're able to find the a, b, and c numerical value to plug into the formula. Remember, when we start off solving this quadratic relationship to find the roots, we want to verify that the y value is set equal to 0 due to the fact that when we have an x-intercept, the x value in the ordered pair always is the numerical value, like 2 or 3, and remember the y value is 0. Let's go ahead and get started today and try this one together. Please make sure that you copy it down in your notes along with the formula, and we're going to go ahead and start to identify the a, b, and c. The a, remember, is the x squared term. So that means it's going to be the 3. Remember, when we select the a, b, and c, it's only the numerical values, not the variable. B is going to represent negative 10. We're going to also make sure that we take the sign that's in front of the number. If it says minus 10x, then it's a negative 10x. And then the c would be 8. What we're going to do is put it into the formula. What I will do is go ahead and point up here, and then I will write it here so you can identify how to set it up. What I like to do is think about this negative symbol out front of a b and read it as the opposite of. So when I write it in my formula, I'm going to go ahead and do the opposite of my b term, which would be a positive 10. What I would do next is to go ahead and write the plus minus symbol, which we'll come back to in just a moment. I'm going to do the square root symbol, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and square my b term. Now remember, when I square a number, remember this term is always going to be positive. No matter what, if I square a negative number or a positive, remember 2 negatives when you multiply when they're positive is always a positive, just like 2 negatives when you multiply is always a positive. So a negative 10 squared would be 100. Then I would go ahead and put minus 4. I'm going to multiply it by my a term and then also by my c term. Then what I'm going to do is divide it by 2 times a. I'm going to go ahead and multiply 2 times a. 2 times 3 is 6. Now, in order to solve, what I like to do first is I like to solve what's underneath the square root symbol first. This is called a discriminant. If you're not sure how to spell it, it is D-I-S-C-R-I-M-I-N-A-N-T. The discriminant, remember, is the number right underneath that square root symbol. So let's go ahead and solve that first. I'm going to go ahead and multiply together the 3 numbers, the negative 4, the a, and the c. When I multiply a negative times a positive, my answer to this multiplication problem is going to be negative. What I would do next is go ahead and multiply 4 times 3 times 8. 4 times 3, remember, is 12. And when I multiply that by 8, what I would get is 96. So that would be a negative or a minus 96. When I go ahead and fill out the rest of this formula, or when I simplify, I would do 10 plus minus the square root, and I would do 100 minus 96. If this happened to be a positive number, then I would do 100 plus 96. Just remember, 100 minus 96 is going to be 4. Then what I'm going to do is divide that by 6. Now we talked a little bit today about, yesterday, about what this symbol plus minus stands for. Remember, in order to find the roots, just in case if there are 2 x-intercepts or roots, I need to do this problem twice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate now. I'm going to do this problem and do 10 plus the square root of 4, and then divide it by 6. Then what I will do is do 10 minus the square root of 4, and divide it by 6. When I solve or simplify both of these, I will get my roots. So the square root of 4 is 2. That means that 2 times 2 would equal 4. So remember, the square root symbol tells us what do I take times itself to get that 4. So this would be 10 plus 2 divided by 6. This would be 10 minus 2 divided by 6. 10 plus 2 is 12, and 12 divided by 6 is 2. So this would be one of my x-intercepts or roots. The other side, 10 minus 2, would be 8. And then I would do 8 divided by 6 to be able to get my solution. Now, sometimes we know that our x-intercepts can be a fraction. Sometimes they could be decimal representations. So just remember, 6 goes into 8 one time with 2 6 left over. So remember, I can reduce this one to 1 1/3. When I go ahead and write out my roots, I could say x is equal to 2 or 1 1/3, or and 1 1/3, or I could write my two intercepts 2, 0, and my other x-intercept 1 1/3, comma 0. These would be the two places on the graph that parabola or the quadratic would touch on the x-intercept, or excuse me, the x-axis. So what I would like you to do is to go ahead and pause, make sure, or rewatch this part, make sure you know how to get this problem set up, and make sure that you have the two roots. And when you're ready, I'd like you to go ahead and copy this next problem down. The problem is this. I'm going to scooch this off. Okay, the next problem that I would like you to try is 2x squared minus x minus 3 is equal to 0. I'd like you to go ahead and write it. Take just a moment and pause. And when you are done, go ahead and unpause and I will show you the solution. Go ahead and pause now. Okay, now that you've unpaused, here is the solution. What I want you to do is realize that the a is 2, the b is -1. I realize that there's no number in front of that x, but it's -1, and the c is -3. I went ahead and did the opposite of the b term, plus minus b squared. Remember, -1 squared is 1. Then I did -4 or -4 times a times c, which is 2 times -3, and then I did 2 times a to get 4. When I multiplied the -4, the 2, and the -3, my answer was a plus 24 or a positive 24 because two negatives make a positive. And when I add the 1 and the 24, my discriminant or the number underneath that square root symbol is going to be 25. The square root of 25 is 5, so when I branched off on both of these pathways to be able to find my roots, I did 1 plus 5 divided by 4, and I did 1 minus 5 divided by 4, and what I got for my two roots was -1 and 3/2, which would mean 1 1/2. Verify that you had these as your solution.